Look at the corner of your room. There is likely an object there, perhaps tucked halfway under the bed or sitting on a shelf gathering a fine layer of grey dust. Maybe it is a guitar with a single broken string that you haven't touched in 6 months. Maybe it is a sketchbook filled with 3 brilliant drawings, followed by 50 blank pages. Or perhaps it is a stack of coding manuals, a half-knitted scarf, or a camera lens you bought with a paycheck you barely had, convinced that this, finally, was the thing that would define you. When you look at these objects, you do not see hobbies. You see a graveyard. You see a museum of abandoned identities, a collection of people you tried to be but couldn't quite sustain. And in the silence of your apartment, under the hum of the refrigerator and the blue light of the city spilling through the blinds, a terrifying thought begins to take shape in your chest. It whispers that the problem isn't the guitar or the camera or the code. The problem is you. You feel that, unlike everyone else, who seems to possess a solid, immutable core, a true self, you are fundamentally hollow. You feel like a ghost who has learned to wear the clothes of the living, changing costumes from room to room, terrified that if someone were to strip away the interests, the jokes and the mirrored behaviors, they would find absolutely nothing underneath. This is the haunting sensation of having no personality. It is the distinct, heavy loneliness of the chameleon. But I want you to stay with me in this discomfort for a moment, because this feeling, as heavy as it is not a diagnosis of emptiness. It is, in fact, a symptom of a sophisticated, ancient, and dangerously misunderstood neurological architecture. You are not empty. You are simply overflowing in a world designed for cups that are too small. To understand why you feel this specific form of existential erasure, we must first look at how you navigate social reality. You likely have a high capacity for empathy, but not just the standard variety. You possess what psychologists might call high permeability empathy. When you are in a conversation, you do not just listen, you absorb. You unconsciously scan the micro-expressions, the tone, and the latent desires of the person across from you, and then, almost reflexively, you adjust your frequency to match theirs. If they are intellectual, you become analytical. If they are boisterous, you become energetic. If they are sad, you become a soft place to land. For years, you have probably framed this as faking it. You leave social gatherings feeling exhausted, drained by the performance, wondering which version of you was real. But consider the evolutionary biology of the tribe. For hundreds of thousands of years, survival did not favor the rigid specialist who could only exist in one mode. Survival favored the diplomat, the translator, the bridge builder. Your brain is wired for social harmony. You are detecting the emotional temperature of the room and adjusting the thermostat to keep the peace. This mirroring is not a lack of personality. It is a high-level survival mechanism. You are the glue that keeps disparate groups from tearing each other apart. The problem is that when the diplomat returns to their private chambers, and there is no one left to negotiate with, they forget their own language. But the root of this anxiety goes deeper than just social mirroring. It strikes at the heart of your professional and creative identity. We live in a civilization that worships the specialist. From the moment you entered the education system, you were placed on a conveyor belt designed to narrow your focus. Pick a major, pick a niche, pick a career, pick a brand. The modern world is obsessed with the I-shaped individual. Someone who digs deep into one specific vertical until they hit bedrock. This creates a profound dissonance for you because your mind is likely M-shaped or rhizomatic. You are a neophile, a lover of the new. Your brain lights up with the dopamine of the novice. You love the initial steep learning curve of a new obsession, the rush of connecting dot A to dot B. But the moment you master the basics and the plateau of routine sets in, your brain screams for the exit. You abandon the project, leaving another artifact in your graveyard of hobbies, And the shame cycle begins again. Society tells you this is a lack of discipline. It tells you that you are flighty, flaky, or lazy. But let us look at this through the lens of human history. For 99% of our species' existence, the specialist was a liability. If you were only good at hunting bison, and the bison migrated, you died. The most successful human archetype was the polymath of the plains. The individual who could hunt, forage, navigate by the stars, build shelter, and tell stories around the fire. Your inability to stick to one thing is actually a latent expression of optimal foraging strategy. Your brain is scanning the environment for resources, information, and skills, gathering a diverse portfolio of knowledge to ensure survival in a changing world. You are biologically engineered for a chaotic, unpredictable environment, but you are currently trapped in a hyper-structured industrial zoo that demands you perform the same trick over and over again for food pellets. This brings us to the most insidious source of your pain, the commodification of the human soul. We have drifted into a cultural era where identity is synonymous with personal brand. We are told that we must be easily categorized so that we can be easily sold. If you are a graphic designer who also loves baking and evolutionary biology, the market is confused. It doesn't know which box to put you in. It doesn't know how to monetize you. And because we have internalized the logic of the marketplace, you begin to view yourself as a failed product. You look at the successful people around you, the ones who have bio sections on social media that read like a coherent mission statement, and you feel a deep envy. They seem so solid. They seem to know exactly who they are. But this is the great lie of the digital age. You are mistaking their marketing for their soul. You are looking at a curated performance of consistency and mistaking it for internal peace. The truth is, the demand to be one thing is a form of violence against the complexity of the human spirit. It creates a phantom limb syndrome, where you cut off parts of your curiosity to fit into the box. But those severed parts still ache in the middle of the night. The guilt you feel when you abandon a hobby or shift your personality is the friction between your expansive nature and a constrictive society. You feel like you have no personality because you have too many. You are a constellation trying to squeeze itself into a single star. You contain multitudes, as Whitman wrote, but you are living in a world that only knows how to read binary code. So, how do we live with this? How do you stop feeling like a ghost in your own life? The first step is a radical act of reframing. You must stop viewing your adaptability as a defect and start viewing it as your greatest asset. In the coming decades, as artificial intelligence begins to dominate the realm of deep specialization, the linear path will become the dangerous path. The algorithm can diagnose a disease better than a doctor. It can write code faster than a developer, and it can draft legal contracts better than a lawyer. The specialist is the easiest thing to automate. But what the machine cannot do is synthesize. It cannot take a concept from 18th century poetry and apply it to modern UI design. It cannot use the principles of jazz improvisation to manage a crisis team. This is your domain. You are the alchemist. Your lack of focus is actually the gathering of ingredients. Every time you dipped your toe into a new world, pottery, philosophy, coding, gardening, you are collecting a unique mental model. You possess a cognitive diversity that allows you to see patterns that the specialist ignores. You are not behind in life. You have been building a foundation that is wider and more resilient than the towers around you. However, knowing this intellectually does not stop the emotional bleeding. You need a way to inhabit your life without feeling scattered. We must dismantle the pressure to monetize your curiosity. One of the greatest tragedies of the hustle culture narrative is the death of the amateur. The word amateur comes from the Latin amator, meaning one who loves. To be an amateur is to do something for the sheer, unadulterated joy of the act, without any expectation of mastery or profit. You must give yourself permission to be beautifully, happily mediocre at the things you love. Pick up that guitar with the broken string and play it badly. Write poetry that no one will ever see. When you remove the capitalist imperative from your hobbies, you remove the shame of quitting. You are allowed to visit a tailored interest for a season and then leave. You are a tourist of the human experience. You do not need to buy real estate in every town you visit. There is a concept I want you to carry with you called the portfolio life. Instead of trying to find one job or one label that explains 100% of who you are, which is an impossible mathematical equation, imagine your life as a portfolio of investments. You might have a pay-the-bills career that uses 40% of your skills. You might have a creative outlet that uses 20%. You might have a community role that uses another 10%. Your personality is not found in any single one of these buckets. It is found in the unique composition of the entire portfolio. You are the curator of this collection, not the content of a single frame. Furthermore, we must address the void you feel when you are alone. If you strip away the mirroring, the people-pleasing, and the hobbies, what is left? You fear it is nothing, but I challenge you to sit in that silence and look closer. That emptiness is not a vacuum. It is a canvas. It is the distinct, quiet observer behind the eyes. The part of you that notices the way the light hits the pavement at 5 p.m. The part of you that feels a sudden, inexplicable ache when you hear a cello. The part of you that recognized yourself in the title of this video. That observer is your true self. It is not defined by what it does, but by how it perceives. Your personality is not a list of nouns. Writer, painter, engineer. It is a verb. It is the way you process the world. It is the specific, unique filter through which you experience reality. No one else sees the world exactly the way you do. No one else makes the specific connections you make. The void is simply the open space where your potential lives, waiting for the next wave of inspiration to fill it. There is a certain kind of freedom in being no one. When you stop trying to defend a rigid identity, you become fluid. You become like water, able to move through any crack, able to adapt to any vessel, yet capable of eroding the hardest stone over time. The people who are convinced they are somebody are often brittle. They break when the world changes because their identity is a rigid structure. You, the ghost, the chameleon, the wanderer. You are anti-fragile. You can reinvent yourself 1,000 times because you never trapped yourself in a single form. So go back to that corner of your room. Look at the dusty guitar. Look at the blank canvas. Do not apologize to them. Do not feel the weight of failure. Look at them as souvenirs from a life lived with curiosity. You went there. You explored that coast, and then you sailed on. You are not unfinished. You are simply in motion. And in a world that demands we all stand still and turn into statues, your movement is the most alive thing about you. You do not have no personality. You have all of them. And that is a burden, yes, but it is also a magnificent, terrifying gift.